Releasing back in the 1960s, 101 Dalmatians is one of the oldest Disney movies that have been made, and amongst those made around that time or even before this, it is definitely one that stands out as being one of the better ones made during that time. So a couple of days ago, a new Disney live action movie called Cruella, which is the villain from 101 Dalmatians, released onto Disney Plus Premium. As it contains an 101 Dalmatians character, so it's sort of a spin-off, I've thought now is a good time to include it in a ranking of all of the 101 Dalmatians movies. There's actually been more than I thought, so without further ado, let's get into my ranking. Coming in at 5th and last place, easily, is 102 Dalmatians. This was the second live action 101 Dalmatians movie. It's genuinely one of the worst Disney movies I've ever seen. To kick things off, it has a plot which isn't at all appealing to an adult, let alone a kid who most Disney movies are directed towards. That's their target audience, and it deals with the psychological battle of trying to change Cruella de Vil, and that's not something which is going to be entertaining to a child, and it's not something they're going to enjoy. For the things they can enjoy, they've removed them from the previous movie. The funny comic relief characters, a lot of the puppies are gone. It's really hard to find any features that kids will enjoy. The writing is bizarre, that goes for the script, the plot. Glenn Close gives a good performance, as you're always entitled to, but that really can't save what is a dreadful movie, especially by Disney's standards. Coming in at 4th place is 101 Dalmatians, the 1996 live-action adaptation. This is the predecessor to the movie I had in last place, and it is much better, however not that good. It's nowhere near as good as the original, however it does make some changes which do benefit this movie into the live action form. One which I'm sure is probably used to keep the price down and containing as little CGI as possible is the fact that the puppies or the Dalmatians don't speak. So that does lead to a lot of quietness within the movie, which feels awkward at times where it just follows the animals, but as they're animals, which most people like, that's entertaining enough. And unlike 102 Dalmatians, in this live action adaptation, there is fun to be had for the younger children. It does come across cheesy and corny, campy if you're watching it now like I did, and some things haven't really aged particularly well, especially the use of CGI in it when they had to. It is a very goofy film, but children will still enjoy it. So as a critic, you can't complain too much if it delivers on what it's trying to for its target audience. However, if you're gonna be harsh like I am, it is kind of hard to sit through if you're my age or older. And the whole movie takes its time. It feels like it's building up to a big climax. And when it gets to a certain point, you're like, okay, now it's gonna get interesting. And then bam, that's the end of the movie. So that bit kind of frustrated me because I could look past all the other cringy things, but it's still not a great movie if you're gonna be critical. Coming in at 3rd place is 101 Dalmatians 2, Patch's London Adventure. This is the movie I actually watched this morning before recording this, and I honestly didn't know it existed until I researched into these movies. Here we have another example of an unnecessary direct-to-video Disney sequel which doesn't add anything on top of its predecessor. This movie comes about 40 years after the original was made, so you know when they made that, they never had a plan for a sequel. It's obviously been made years later just to make a bit more cash. And I think if you go into this expecting a sequel, you're going to be let down even more because in that 40-year gap, a lot of things have changed. There's a big difference between 101 Dalmatians and 101 Dalmatians 2. I'm not actually sure what has the bigger budget. 101 Dalmatians played to its restrictions very well and created a unique experience, whereas here, you know, the comic relief is very, very different. It's not anywhere near as serious. Cruella de Vil was over the top in the previous movie, but here she's just ridiculously cheesy, and she doesn't have that kind of creepiness that you had to her from the 60s movie. It doesn't really have a set tone, and when it introduces this plotline with this wonder dog called Thunderbolt, that was the nail in the coffin for me not really enjoying this movie as a sequel or in general. It felt way too out of place, and to be honest, this movie didn't really have its tone. It didn't find its feet until maybe the last half an hour, but even then I wasn't a big fan of this movie. But it's better than what else has come in this list. Coming in at second place is Cruella. This, of course, being the movie that has just been released, and the reason I'm doing this list. Look, I was very skeptical about this movie when it was first announced. I wasn't even too sure about the trailers, but watching it, it was a great surprise. I'm not saying it's a fantastic movie, but it is something different and unique, especially in these Disney live-action movies, which have mostly been disappointing or predictable, or maybe even a scene-for-scene copy of the movie it was remaking. But here it tells a completely different story, establishes a tone which may not be as entertaining for children, and that just goes for the whole movie in general, but as an adult or an older person, you can really enjoy what this tone establishes and how stylish it is. As if it was in any doubt, both the Emmas, Emma Stone and Emma Thompson, really crush their roles and delivers some fantastic performances. And as for some side characters, Horace and Jasper, they were portrayed really well. They weren't just used as, you know, comic relief henchmen, but they also had a purpose there. You could see how important they were to Cruella and how important Cruella was to them. I mentioned these Disney live action movies can be kind of predictable because, you know, it's either cliche or we've seen the movie before just in animation form, but here they take some turns and twists that you may not expect, which I really appreciated because we just haven't had that too much from these adaptations. It is a very niche movie inside of this Disney live action remake franchise, I don't know if you can even call it that, and the runtime does drag a little bit too long. Like, you could remove some things and it wouldn't change your memory of the movie at all. So overall, Cruella was a very nice surprise. By no means one of the best Disney movies, but certainly a lot better than I was expecting. But coming in at first is the one that started it all, 101 Dalmatians. I mentioned earlier on this video that this had some restrictions with its budget, and it actually makes for a really unique experience in terms of the animation and the drawings. And I can't recall seeing too many different movies like that, and especially you don't get any of them like that today. You get this really sweet connection between all these Dalmatians, which makes for a really good family watch. It may not be the funniest of the Disney movies, but it does have a very engaging plot. And that's a big praise I have about this movie. It has one plot. It doesn't try and convolute things with having all these side plots. No, it's one plot and it continues following down that and doesn't stray away from it. Cruella de Vil goes on to be a fantastic Disney villain in this classic and goes on to be one of the most iconic Disney characters, let alone villains. There are many scenes which some may not be able to appreciate where it just is dead silence, no music in the background, no dialogue, just dead silence. I thought it was really impactful for sometimes it was used, but as I said, maybe a child watching nowadays or someone who's not a big fan of movies or whatever may criticize that as it just feels awkward. And I'm sure if you saw that kind of editing in a YouTube video, you'd maybe click the dislike button, because that's happened to me before when I didn't edit some things out of my videos. So yeah, overall though, this is a classic, a very unique watch, one which I thoroughly enjoyed rewatching, which I hadn't done since I was a kid. So for me, 101 Dalmatians is my top pick. So that was my ranking of the 101 Dalmatians movies. I bet you didn't realize there was that many either. As always, let me know what your ranking would be down below, and make sure to like and subscribe as it really helps me out. The reason I didn't do an individual Cruella de Vil, I pretty much covered everything I wanted to say in here. I'm trying to figure out some different ways of doing my videos and what different sort of videos I can make, because some things weren't working out, although I love doing it. Like yesterday, my A Quiet Place review only got 6 views, so I'm trying to change some things up, and where I'm trying to change things up, I just had a busy schedule around this area, and you'll see why hopefully in the coming days when I do a Disney live action ranking, which is got a lot of movies. Once I got behind and stuff, God, it gets stressful. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and I hope to see you in my next video.